Well, my footy career started basically because of chance. I'd played soccer as a youngster when I was 16 and 17. My dad was heavily involved in soccer and through the North Geelong Soccer Club, so I was happy to play there on a Sunday. Then at the start of the 72 footy season, the St Peter's Footy Club was playing at Baker's Oval next to the house I was living at the time, and one of the people from the club came over and asked if I could fill in with the under-18s because they were short. So I went over and had a game and kicked half a dozen or so goals, and within 3 weeks or so I'd started playing in the seniors for St Peter's, but I was also playing soccer at the same time on Sundays, and St Peter's was playing on Saturdays. So that year we ended up having a pretty good year with St Peter's. We played off in the grand final and got beaten by St Mary's in a pretty close game, and we were coached by Tony Hannon, and that's where I actually met Kevin Hannon, who's one of the best players who I've ever come across and one of the nicest guys. So that was a fantastic year for me, and something that was a bit of a surprise, and slowly I gave soccer away to concentrate on footy. Halfway through the year, Geelong invited me to come and train with them. So as I was only very novice to the game, I was pretty nervous. Players like Doug Wade had been people I'd idolised them, and so I got to training that night and we were doing circle work, and Doug went to kick the ball to me and I didn't know what to say. I wanted to call him Mr. Wade, but I couldn't. I didn't know what to say anything, so I didn't say anything. He still kicked the ball to me, and it was one of the greatest moments of my life, having Doug kick the ball to me in circle work. So the following year, after I was invited down to Geelong to play in the under-19s, I played practice matches in the under-19s, but when the first game came around, they were short in the seconds, so my first game at Geelong was actually in the seconds against Carlton. And I played most of the year in the seconds and kicked 70-odd goals. Unfortunately, I didn't get an opportunity to play in the seniors. They did try 6 or 7 players at full forward that year, but I wasn't considered good enough to be given an opportunity, so I thought I'd come back the following year and do the pre-season. So I did the pre-season, and at the end of the pre-season, what they do is at the last training session, they called us up to the social club to announce the list, and my name wasn't on the list. So when they also left me off the supplementary list, it meant that I was no longer involved in the club. I sat there and no one came to say a word to me, so I just picked my bag up and left. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. A couple of days later, Billy rang me and invited me over to West. I didn't know much about West. In 72, I went to the preliminary final and watched that game, and that's the only real connection I had with West, just watching that one game, and it was an exciting game, so I thought, well, yeah, I'll go and have a go. In 74, I played the first 4 games and then broke my wrist, and I was out for the rest of the year, and I didn't come back until the prelim final against Oakley, and we got beaten. So it was a bit of a wipeout year for me. In 75, I was pretty determined to have a good year, and there was a really good feel about the club. There were lots of great players there that had come over from Geelong, and we played Oakley in the first game. That's one of the vivid memories I have of that, because they were expected to be really hard to beat that year. They recruited really well, and we beat them quite comfortably at West, and I was lucky enough to get 10 goals that game, and it set me up for a good season. It set our club up for a great season. I didn't think at any stage we were going to get beaten in the grand final that year. I thought we were going to be premiers. We had so many great players on all the lines. Our back line was just sensational. Players like Stokesy and Friendy and Brian Dunn and Ivan Kleiny and Howard Smith. They were just terrific players, and Howard was probably the best fullback I'd ever played on. I'd played on him in practice games, and he was just really, really hard to play on. And then, of course, Tony in the middle was just exceptional. He was one of the fittest players I'd ever seen. I used to see him running of a Saturday night and Sunday night after a game. He was just totally committed and a great player. And then, obviously, we had lots of forwards who created great chances for me and gave me plenty of opportunities. And so it was a fantastic place to be at. And we then went after that. We had a couple of years that we didn't have a lot of success, but then when Billy came back in '79, we probably should have won the grand final. We had lots of opportunities too, but we didn't. So I stayed at Geelong West until 1984, so I'd had 11 years there, which were fantastic. There were some great people at that club. At the end of '84, I got the opportunity to go to St Peter's, and I was really grateful they gave me that opportunity to be a playing coach for 3 years, which I really enjoyed. And at the end of that time, my career as a footballer finished. I'd been at St Peter's and Geelong West for a combination of 15 years, playing at both clubs, and thoroughly enjoyed my time there. So I started at St Peter's and finished at St Peter's. I was probably blessed in that I was a very accurate kick. That came about, I suppose, through lots of training. I used to train. I used to go and practice before training and after training, and time away from the footy ground and at various ovals. It was just something that I wanted to become good at, and I thought that was one of my assets. My kicking for goal was something that I don't know, probably came about as a youngster. Like as a little kid, we used to live next door to this big shed that had girders like goal posts. So I used to kick the old plastic footy at that of a night time, just time and time again, even though I wasn't playing footy. And then when I started playing footy, it just felt natural coming in to kick the ball. I did have my off days. I remember kicking 4-8 against Williamstown on a boggy Williamstown ground one day, and things just wouldn't go right for me. But generally, I would kick more goals than I would miss, and it wasn't as if I had a set routine. It was just walk back and just amble in and pick it. I suppose pick a target that you're shooting at behind the goal, and that was it. That was about it. So there wasn't any great science to it. I thought I could read the game pretty well and get away from my opponents, and that in the first few metres I would get that break. And then on top of that, I was really lucky because I had players like Stephen Wolfe and John Hughes who were able to pinpoint passes so beautifully to me. My eyes lit up as soon as either of those two players got the ball, because I knew I just had to make position and the ball would end up in my arms. They were just fantastic. So I guess agility, and if the ball did hit the ground, some of the opponents were possibly a little bit bigger, so I had that advantage over them. And yeah, so I think I'd put it down to reading the play, accurate kicking, and having the players up the field who pass the ball really well to me. When I left Geelong at the end of 1973, I didn't think I'd ever go back there again, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. When I started at Geelong West, I found that it was a place where everyone was respected, from the players to the committee, the supporters. Everyone had a role, and it was just a fantastic place to be. So by the end of '75, when we won the premiership and came back to the club rooms and to the West Town Hall, and there were 2,000 people there waiting for us, I'd found where I wanted to be. Geelong Footy Club Bill McMaster, came and asked me a few weeks later if I'd be interested in coming back to Geelong in 1976. But at that stage, I said no. I didn't want to go back. I was still bitter the way I was treated when I left, without any explanation as to why they didn't want me there. And I'd found somewhere where I wanted to be. I felt welcomed, and I really liked the people I was involved with at Geelong West. So at that stage, it wasn't a hard decision for me not to go back to Geelong. We probably should have had more premierships at Geelong West than we did. In 1979, that was one that just got away for lots of reasons. I was to blame with my poor kicking. I know that there are other players who missed easy shots in the last quarter when we should have won the game. They had a lucky bounce where they scored a goal. I remember Murray Stabb, the umpire, took a mark off me with a few minutes to go when it was the game was up for grabs, and I think that was the game that we should have won. There were a couple of incidents in the game that were pretty nasty, and I think that for all concerned, it was pretty lucky that Billy left Steve Parsons out of that team, because had Steve Parsons played, I reckon Trevor Price may have met his match and may not have done what he did to John Scarlett. It was a very nasty incident, and there were a few of those throughout the game, and we probably, if we look back, we would probably think, well, that's the one that got away, and we would all be really disappointed about that, because that should have been West's second premiership within 4 years. And then in '83 we played Preston. We went into the game fairly confident that we could win it. Unfortunately, they were just a little bit too good on the day, but we certainly thought that we were a big chance to win that game. So it was a bit like the Olympics. Every 4 years we were getting into the grand final. We happened to win one, but we certainly could have won more. By the time 1984 came around, I could feel that I was starting to struggle a little bit with my fitness, and I thought that things were going to only get worse from there on. So I'd had discussions with Darky Harris through the year, and we sort of decided that was going to be my last year. So at the end of '84, I had the opportunity to go to St Peter's. The coaching position had come up at St Peter's. So I finished at the end of '84 after 11 seasons. I was starting to get a few injuries as well, and so therefore it made it easier to make that decision to go to St Peter's, where I then went and was player coach for 3 years. Used to have some really hard opponents in the VFA in those years, though there were some good players who had come back from the AFL or from the VFL at that stage. Blokes like Rod Carter and Terry O'Neill from the Swans had come back and played. There were some well-known names like Alan Harper and Alfie Buse and Trevor Price who played, and they were always hard to beat. Alfie surprised me with his pleasantries before the game. One day he shook my hand and said all the best, and I thought, oh, he's a nice pleasant fellow, but as soon as the ball was bounced, that was it. He gave me hell for the next 4 quarters. There was a fellow from Coburg called Gary Pitt who, for some reason, I struggled with. I could never kick a bag on him. There was just something about him. He wasn't very big, but he just always seemed to be there. He was actually a pretty hard opponent. But in the VFA at that stage, the fullbacks got plenty of practice, because they had to come up each week against the guys like Freddie Cook and Kim Smith and Frosty Miller, or guys who were kicking bags. So they had plenty of practice, but there was some really good players back in the VFA all over the ground. So it didn't matter whether you were playing at full forward or centre half back. You always had a good opponent. So First Division back then was really a high standard. During my time at Geelong West, I had a number of coaches, and obviously Billy stands out probably because the respect I had for him as an VFL footballer at that time, the games he played and what he had done there, but also because of the way that he coached. He just had everyone's respect, and I had my 2 best years, I think, under Billy, because of the way that he structured things. It was a little bit difficult for Howard coming in '76 after Billy had coached, because he lost some players, and also following in the footsteps of Billy would have been very difficult for him. The other coaches I had all contributed to the footy club. I got on well with all of them, and it's just one of the things that stood out for me was the fact that when Billy was coach there, he made sure that he had really good structures around him, and I think that led to the success that he had. So he was well organised and had a good footy brain, knew when to tell you off, knew when to cajole you, and he was very supportive. So I want to thank all of the coaches I had there, especially Billy. When I look back over my career, I really can't remember individual games. The memories I have are of the people I was involved with, right through from coaches who I respected, the supporters who were just really passionate and fantastic people, always supporting you whether you were winning or losing. The committees that were generally small, but they were really hard-working and good quality people. And the players that came to that club over the time I was there were just amazing. You made so many friendships, and it really didn't matter whether you were first picked in the seniors or last picked in the reserves. Everyone was treated the same way, and it was just a wonderful place to be at. It was a real privilege to be involved at Geelong West for all those years. We had some great times, and I think part of that success was due to, or the gelling of the players was due to the fact that we went down to Melbourne on bus every away game, and going down there you develop relationships, and after the games there you'd stay for a little while, have a couple of drinks and get back on the bus, have a couple of drinks and listen to Yatesy belt out his rendition of whatever song, Big Bad John, that he used to sing, and things like that. And going back to the club rooms and meeting up there, it was just a really good place to be at. So my highlights are more about the people there of my career, and I was lucky enough to kick goals, and you don't kick goals unless you've got people who are passing the ball to you, and I've got lots of people to be grateful for. There were lots of funny moments. I used to have lots of laughs at Geelong West. Listening to people like Barry Eddy sledging other players on the ground, and even Wellesley. But see, with Wellesley, one thing he used to do, Greg, was he would run past my opponent and sledge my opponent, and so therefore I would then cop it from my opponent, and he'd run off down the field. So thanks, Wellesley. It was just great to be on the field with all of those players. I think that when I look back at my career, it's not. I don't look back and think of the goals I kicked. I don't think of the games I played. I think of the relationships I formed with the lovely people that were involved in that footy club. And I just want to say it was a real privilege to be involved. I don't know what Billy Goggins' take on this is, but if you ask him, he might explain it. I actually like to know. We had won 10 or 11 games in a row in '75, and we're going down to play the bottom team, Caulfield, down in Melbourne, and it was a little bit wet. So they took us to Robert Gannon's pub for breakfast, and during breakfast there we had plenty to eat, and Billy got up and spoke about how wet the day was, how cold it was, how miserable it was, how the change rooms at Caulfield were really small and uninviting. And as we were going down there, I thought, I don't really feel like playing today. We got down there, looked at the club rooms, tiny club rooms, and I certainly wasn't in the mood to play footy that day. I don't know how the other players were, but we got beaten by Caulfield. Billy didn't seem too upset. And we then went and won our next few games in a row against the better opposition, and I don't know whether Billy orchestrated that loss or not, but it certainly felt to me that that's what happened, and it was part of his plan. And then we got to the last game of the year, and he rested quite a number of players, and Lindsay Toolman came out onto the ground to play. And I laughed during the game because he took on half the Port team. Buster Harlan had his shirt ripped off, and Lindsay's running around hitting blokes. I think Lindsay got reported, some Port players got reported. And Lindsay lived off that for many years to come after that, the notoriety of taking on the whole Port team. So he was. That were the only two losses we had for the year. So Billy wasn't disappointed that we lost those two games, and I'm sure that the losses in those two games helped us when we got to the grand final. The game today is really nothing like it was back in the 70s, whether it was VFL or VFA. The position play and the structures now are totally different. I don't know how I'd go playing today. There'd be a lot of defending you would need to do, running up and down the ground, and I think that's taken away a little bit from the game. I think part of the exciting thing was going to the footy and watching Doug Wade kick 12 or 13 goals, or even Freddie and Frosty kicking a bag full, standing up the other end, watching them in awe. So that was what got people through the gates, I think, in those times. So it has certainly changed a lot, and and I'm not sure how I would go playing footy today, but back then it was thoroughly enjoyable. Today I go down and watch St Kilda play. I'm just a member of St Kilda. I enjoy going to watch them play, and during summer I've got a connection with Melbourne City. Both my nephews are involved in the running of the club, and so I've always had a love of soccer, so enjoy going down there to watch. So apart from those two things, I play golf, not very well most of the time, but they keep me occupied.
You've given your heart to get here and your soul to get it right. You can take 'em boots and all, but it's sure gonna take a fight. When you spend all week getting to your peak, you're gonna have your say. You bet. On Sunday, it's the BFA. It's Sunday, you're gonna make your play for the BFA. Today you're gonna fly. It's Sunday for the BFA. It's Sunday.